Thanks, Mary. Hi, Andy.
Hi, Steve. How are you doing?
Nice to see you. And thanks, everyone, for being here today. I just want to do some quick introductions. I know this is fairly short, and I don't want to take up the whole half hour with the introductions. First, just to acknowledge and recognize that we are on the traditional territories of the Coast Salish people, and we're always thankful for that. I'd also like to recognize Debbie Pollock is here, and a few other members of the VTF. I see Sean and Sylvia, and maybe a few other people are joining us, and thank you for coming. I'd also like to thank a few people who helped organize this event. It's been a long professional development day, and I just appreciate everyone coming out to the event this afternoon. Denise Johnson, Donna Wong, Leanne Buteau, Mary and Rod Ratzlaff have been involved in helping us organize this event, so great appreciation. And also to our tech crew, John and David. Just a little bit of context, very briefly. Andy has had a long time association with teaching and learning in our province. He has been at times a visiting professor at UBC and has presented countless times to educators in BC, and every time I've gone away learning something new. Vancouver administrators asked Andy to share his latest work with them about a year and a half ago, and he did this in a similar way through a webcast, a video conference. And this initiated the beginnings of a potential collaborative inquiry, a collaborative opportunity with teachers. The administrators brought Andy back and felt that, of course, in order to be collaborative and involve teachers, we need teachers in the room. And the administrators had already had the opportunity through their conference, so we wanted to do some more. And Andy kindly offered to provide a short session this afternoon, and certainly as we look forward to the future, will be a part of being available for further discussions. Just a little bit about Andy. He is the Thomas More Brennan Chair in the Lynch School of Education at Boston College, and the mission of this chair is to promote social justice and connect theory and practice in education. Andy has taught at many levels, from primary school on through university level, including Oxford. He was the co-founder and director of the International Centre for Educational Change at OISE at the University of Toronto. He's had numerous visiting professorships around the world. Andy comes to us from a northern mill town in England. He went to a primary school called Spring Hill in a place called Accrington, which is in Lancashire, which, Andy, I won't hold that against you, because I was born about an hour's drive away from where Andy grew up, and it's about 45 miles away, I believe. And I always remember the War of the Roses, but we've let that go by. Andy is editor-in-chief of the Journal of Educational Change. He's co-authored or edited more than 30 books. His most recent books are Professional Capital, Transforming Teaching in Every School, with Michael Fullan, and more recently, The Global Fourth Way, The Quest for Educational Excellence. Andy is a researcher, writer, consultant, and advisor, and has worked around the world in support of teaching and learning. Andy's wife, Pauline, is an educator. Their children, Stuart and Lucy, work in the fields of law and international development, respectively. And outside of his work, Andy is a keen, long-distance hiker, a passionate supporter of the Burnley Football Club. Again, Andy, I won't hold that against you. They are 7th in the division right now. Leeds United, which was my team, is 11th. And I'm sure that when they meet later this year, that it will be a great rivalry. Yeah. Great background for Andy, and I hope we're not losing him. Here's an opportunity to hear much more from Andy once we reconnect. Remember, this is a Skype call. We may need to dial back in once in a while, and it looks like we may need to dial back in now. Am I correct?
Yep. you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you. So you just need to switch over, Andy, to the PowerPoint, and we should be ready to go. So, colleagues and friends, with that rather scrambled introduction, please welcome Andy Hargreaves.
Thank you. Well, I don't have my camera up of you at the moment, but hopefully I will do shortly. It's great that you've been able to and willing to stay on after a very long professional development day in Vancouver in BC. It's late in the afternoon there now, and this is what professionalism is about. It's about many things, and one of the things about professionalism is putting in that bit extra, giving that bit of extra time and commitment for your own learning when the opportunity becomes available. I see you're scanning in and showing me a picture here. Now they are. Okay, I can see you. That's great. Good to see you. All right. Here it's a public holiday. It is both, if you've been catching up with the news, it's the inauguration of the second term of President Barack Obama, and it is also, probably less well known, it is Martin Luther King Day here, so it's a big public holiday. Everything's closed, everybody's away, but two students, graduate students who are working with me on a range of my projects, including the work I am doing and hoping to do more with British Columbia, are here. So I'm just going to twist the computer around to show you. Here they are. One some of you may recognize. Here you go. They're on my couch in my study. And on the left is Marcella Ossapora. Could you wave, Marcella?
Hi.
Okay, there she is. Marcella's from the other Columbia, the real Columbia. She's in Columbia in Latin America. She's up with us to study in Boston for the next 2 or 3 years, and is a major staff developer and worker in teacher education in her own country. And next to her is Elizabeth Kenny, who some of you may met. There's Elizabeth. And Liz has worked with the administrators in the Vancouver School Board, particularly in October when we went to spend more extended time with them in Whistler. So here's a heads up for their professionalism, because it's Martin Luther King Day, public holiday. Both of them have taken time away from husbands and children in one case in order to be involved in this with you. So why is this taking place? Why do we have this time together? We have this time together really for a couple of reasons. One of them is just to share some ideas with you, and also, if you find these ideas interesting, important, helpful, really to explore, as Steve Cardwell is keen to do, and many of your administrators are keen to do, to push some of these ideas further, to tease them out where they already exist within your board, and in many places they do, to celebrate them, to showcase them, and to move them along even a little bit further as well. So,
excuse me, Andy, it's Denise Johnson. We're not seeing you. I'm not sure if you're aware of that, or your PowerPoint. So
I'm going to put the video off. You tell me if you're seeing me now. Can you see me now?
No.
Yeah, okay, I think something happened when the screens changed. Can you hear me?
We can hear you fine. We just can't see you or your PowerPoint.
So I need to figure out. I think it's because the Skype came back up after it shut off. So I'm just going to go to share screen here and see if it comes back on. Can you see anything now?
We can see you now. Great. Thank you.
Good. Okay. Thank you. Do interrupt at any time when there's a technical glitch of this sort. So, why professional capital? Why should we explore this together? In 1990, some of you will be old enough to remember that Michael Fullen and I were asked by a teachers' federation, which was then the Ontario Public School Teachers' Federation, to write a book about the future, the development of teaching and teachers, that in 100 pages in big print, that had complete scholarly depth and integrity and will be utterly memorable. So we went ahead and did that, and these were the early days, really, of talking academically and strategically about developing more collaboration amongst teachers and more collaboration between teachers and administrators as well. A few years ago, about 5 years ago, the publisher asked us, they said the book's still doing very well, people like it, but it is almost 20 years old. So would you consider doing a second edition, a kind of an update and a revisiting of some of the themes there? So Michael and I thought about this, and then we looked at it and delayed, and looked at it and delayed, and looked at it and delayed, until really about 18 months ago, we felt in a way called to come back to this work, because of the extraordinary attack on teaching and the teaching profession that is taking place, particularly but not exclusively, in the United States. And it is spreading to different parts of the world, including north of the border. And oddly, it's doing this under the banner of improving teaching quality. So we felt we really needed not only to revisit, but in many ways to completely restate, state anew what our position was, to try and use what I guess the Americans call the bully pulpit, to use whatever voice or platform or reputation we have to say something about teachers, about teacher recognition, about teacher respect, and about teacher renewal in response to this agenda. So off we went to write this book. And in the middle of it, we stumbled quite accidentally across this idea, which nobody seemed really to have taken up before in any substantial way, of professional capital. So that's a bit about where it comes from. I'll try and share with you what this is about and why it might be important for all of us in terms of the work we do. I will, from time to time, have to fiddle about just moving the screen ever so slightly so that I can do this. Again, if there's a technical glitch, please let me know. So, capital is an idea that unions and federations are sometimes uncomfortable with, because it's what we've been fighting for years, for decades, but yet it is a powerful idea. It's really just a metaphor. The idea of capital emerges, of course, in economic life, whether you are Adam Smith or Karl Marx or Warren Buffett, the basic idea of capital is the same. It's something that adds net worth to existing assets. It's the idea that if you want to get a return, you have to make an investment. And increasingly we've seen this is true not only in the financial sector, but we've seen that it applies to, metaphorically, in other sectors, in the idea of human capital, that children, teaching children, public education is an investment that yields a return. It's not just a cost, a drain on public expenditure. We've seen it in social capital, the idea that when we're in strong communities with good bonds, even if economically we are relatively in poverty, it will give us an advantage compared to people who don't have those bonds, who don't have those supports. People have used the idea of capital in relation to the environment, with the idea of natural capital, how we steward, look after, renew the environment. And there's even a book recently on erotic capital, I also give webcasts on this. I assure you the room would be full of 500 people if it was. And we're thinking of calling our next book 50 Shades of Professional Capital. And we think that might do a little bit for the sales irrespective of the content. So capital has been used in many ways, and it has this basic meaning that if you want a return, you have to get an investment. And we believe at the moment there is a view of capital in educational reform in many parts of the world, particularly in the US, the UK, places like Sweden, Australia, and so on, and is beginning to creep north of the border as well now, especially at a time of economic recession. And that's the view that when most other forms of making profit have collapsed or fallen away, the property market, financial speculation, the manufacturing sector, that many people believe, including great technological entrepreneurs, that one of the biggest opportunities for profit and return right now is public education. Public education, they believe, is a way of yielding quick returns to capital investment. Quick returns in terms of the sales of technology products and software. Quick returns in terms of testing products. Quick returns in terms of south of the border charter school companies or academies in the UK, or free schools within Sweden. In all these, the idea is that education is the big new market. Public education is the big new market for the private sector. And one of the ways they believe in which you increase returns is by reducing costs. And of course, what is the greatest cost? About 80% of the cost in all kinds of public education, that is teacher salaries. So the business capital view has an interest, in order to make short-term returns, in reducing the costs of teaching. And reducing the costs of teaching are achieved by making teaching technically simple, or the idea of teaching as technically simple rather than complicated, so that people with lesser qualifications can do it. That teaching is something you can pick up fairly fast. That increasingly in the US, people are moving into teaching not through university programs, but through programs in school districts. In England, it's through programs in schools. Teach for America, which runs 6-week training programs over the vacation, then throws people into schools, is eager right now to move into Canada, particularly in the far north, where there's no provision at the moment, but then we might expect increasingly, once they've got a foothold, that they will want to extend their work more into the mainstream, as innovations often do. The business capital view that teaching's easy to pick up. It involves difficult classroom management, but once you've got the hang of it, once you've got the respect of your class, it's something that, with a bit of practice, people with a bit of flair and a natural gift can do. There are many, more and more, who believe that teaching and the improvement of teaching should be driven by data, by spreadsheets, by numerical information on where kids are and how to intervene. Hasn't really taken root in British Columbia yet, but it has in many parts of the world. And increasingly, of course, and this is something that is occurring in BC, particularly under the banner of personalised learning, is the idea that teachers can sometimes be replaceable by online instruction. In the US, there are some states now that mandate that at least one course in high school must be studied online. I know there are some provinces looking at this as well. There's no evidence to support the idea that online instruction is more effective than classroom face-to-face instruction. It's an ideological shift, not one paradoxically based on evidence. But the idea that through all these, that we can improve teaching by replacing teachers with machines or turning teachers into machines of technically simple work, is really the driver behind short-term business capital. And we think this is wrong. We think that Michael and I, that this is wrong for the dignity of the profession, for a career that many people have given their lives to, for the length of training, complexity, time in professional development right now that so many teachers commit to their work, and for the effects that this will have on students if we dumb down teaching, make it simpler, and the ones who will suffer most are the poorest and the disadvantaged. So in response to this, Michael and I came up with an alternative view, which we call professional capital. Professional capital is still based on the idea that if you want to make an investment, if you want a return, you need to make an investment. But this is a long-term investment, not a short-term investment. It's an investment over a generation. It's an investment in the teenagers who won't always thank you immediately for the work you do with them or the impact that you've had on their lives. It is the original idea of human capital, that in teaching we create the future, we shape, we change the generations of the future. And if we invest in that, we will see a return in the quality of citizenship, in the productivity of our economies in the generations to come. And there's enormous amount of evidence to support this. This view of professional capital carries quite different assumptions about teaching. That teaching is not just emotionally hard, controlling a class, but it's technically hard. It requires a lot of knowledge, and knowledge of your content, and knowledge of differentiated instruction, a knowledge of how to pick up the early signs of literacy problems or of special educational needs, the knowledge of how to use research and inquiry as a basis for improving your practice. Teaching isn't easy. Teaching is hard. That's why most of us chose to do it in the first place. Not because it was an easy job, but because it was a job that would bring out the best in us, that we would give our lives to. Teaching here is something that requires rigorous education through universities on long training and good, well-supported practice, well-mentored and coached practice within schools. Teaching that's never perfect, where you've never completely mastered it. You don't, every day, every lesson, every course, you're always looking at how to tweak, how to revise, how to improve it that bit further. Where we look at the evidence in teaching, of course, we look at the data, but it's the judgment we apply to the data that's really important. When a doctor looks at a brain scan, the brain scan doesn't speak to the doctor. It's the judgment you bring to the brain scan that enables you to make an effective diagnosis that can help your patients. Where teaching is not just an individual stood in front of a class, but teaching is a collective responsibility, where teachers work together to improve their practice over time. And where technology does have a role in the classroom, we've seen this in Ontario. We've seen that when teachers, for example, use assistive technologies, sound to text, text to sound, with their students to improve their performance within classrooms, as it does, the kids with special needs will persist in using those technologies if their classroom teachers, their regular classroom teachers, also use technology easily as part of the way they run their classrooms. But thoughtful use of technology is quite different from replacing teachers with technology or insisting that we use iPads or Twitter or whatever else it might be all the time as part of what we're doing. So this is the second view of capital, professional capital, and that's what Michael Fullen and I are about, and we're not the only ones, and we're in a battle for the soul of the profession now because of the huge assault with billions of dollars behind it that people are making on teaching from a business capital point of view. So what are the implications of this? Well, this is about not teaching like an amateur, but teaching like a pro. Teaching like a pro, as those of you who stayed behind will know, it's about undertaking difficult, inspiring work, constantly trying to improve what you're doing and working with all your colleagues to improve what your school does and to improve how you are as a profession overall, within your profession, within your province, within your federation. So it gains increasing quality, recognition, renewal and respect over time. So it's about improving practice. It's about working with others. And it's about improving the wider profession, as well as your own classroom and your own school. Professional capital, and this doesn't come just out of our heads, but comes out of the research we've read and our own research too, is based on three kinds of capital: human, social, there are existing literatures about these, and a third one which is new that we call decisional capital. When you put these together, professional capital, this isn't quite E equals MC squared. We're not Albert Einstein, but professional capital is a function of how these three things, human, social, and decisional capital, work together. And I want to kind of break these down for you now, one by one, so we can see what the implications are. First is human capital. Human capital with teachers is like human capital with individual kids, with our students. It's the capital, the quality of individuals, teachers as individuals. So you will have a better effect on your students the more, on average, the better qualified you are. The more knowledge you have, the better prepared you are. The better the skills you have, the more emotional intelligence you have. Finland, a very high performer in education internationally, screens its teachers not just for their university qualifications, though they are very, very good, but also for their emotional intelligence, their capacity to have empathy, rapport with their students over time. This is human capital. This is, in a way, the simplest one to understand, and some of those who advocate for improved quality in teaching, particularly the economists who are so influential on policy now, this is what they point to: changing teacher qualifications, having more people qualified in maths and science, for example, working on people's skills and competencies, measuring them, paying them according to how well they display those skills and competencies over time, and perhaps punishing them if they don't have those individual capacities. So this is human capital, and what are the implications? The implications are fairly simple and well known. They are not there, but they are about really improving teaching, raising qualifications, raising the bar of taking teachers from the top 30% of the university graduation range rather than the bottom 30%, having effective teacher education programs and so on. So this sounds pretty straightforward until we realize that many people have stereotypes of teachers and what teaching involves. They see the human capital as not being terribly complicated. Here are some images from teachers in Singapore about stereotypes they thought people had of them. I wonder if you see, when you've seen these applied to you by people who look at your work. So I don't know if you can see this picture. Can you see this picture? Shout yes if you can. Shout no if you can't. Okay, good. So, you know, when you look at yourselves or when other people look at you, how do they see you? Do they see you just sitting around having cups of tea at break all day? Do they see you a Superman or Superwoman? Are you a juggler who's constantly got balls in the air? Do some people see you as a kind of tyrannical Joseph Stalin? Or as a family man? Or as Genghis Khan? Or the Dalai Lama? Or the woman down on the bottom right, perhaps? Or perhaps they see you like this. The brilliance of Albert Einstein. The fearsomeness of the Voldemortian approach to classroom life. So, or the inspiration of Dead Poets Society. So what really do people see you? What do people see you? as being, and in establishing the human capital of teaching. This is often what we're up against, to say we need to invest more for higher qualifications, better preparation. We're against these sort of dumbed-down stereotypes that many people have of the work. So let's look at the second area then, and this is very important. You all know that teaching isn't just what you have individually, and you shouldn't be rated or ranked, still less paid, on just what you have individually, because teachers are profoundly affected by where they teach and who they teach with, who you teach with, who your colleagues are. Many of you over your career will have experienced moving from one school to another and suddenly finding you're altogether, quickly, suddenly a much better teacher. And sometimes the reverse is true, a much worse teacher, because of the people you have around you, the kind of leadership you have, and the context you are in. This is what we understand by social capital. Social capital is about the things that affect your performance because of how much trust there is or isn't within your community, among teachers, with parents, between teachers and administrators, how well people collaborate, if there's a sense of collective responsibility amongst all teachers of all grades for every child in the school, not just me and my class, me and my grade. If special education and regular classroom teachers work effectively together for all students who struggle, not just those who are formally identified as having a disability. Whether your peers won't only support and praise you, but whether you'll push each other a little bit into, as you would with your kids, into a zone of mild discomfort so that you can become the best teacher you can be. How you use data together. How well you network, as many schools have done in BC in the performance-based schools, with other schools around you. If you have these things, if you have strong social capital, you will do better, much better, and have stronger effects on your kids than when that capital is weak. The key study here is a study by Carrie Liana in New York City schools, where she looked at 5th grade results in mathematics and how those correlated with teachers' individual human capital and their shared collective social capital. And here's the amazing thing that she found, which is both these things, your individual competencies and your collective capabilities, affect student performance. But social capital can raise human capital. In other words, whatever level you are at, even if you're a weak teacher, if you move into a strong school and a strong community, the very quality and support of people around you will lift you in your performance over time. Strong teachers will become even stronger. All boats are raised when there is strong social capital. But the opposite is not true. The opposite is strong human capital, a great star or brilliant virtuoso or two, will not raise the performance of the whole group and sometimes will even depress it. So if you think that you can perform miracles in your school by having 1 or 2 new brilliant appointments, and the same is true, by the way, for faculties of education, you'll be disappointed, because it's really the quality of the whole group and how it works together, and not 1 or 2 stars that is absolutely the key. So social capital matters probably even more than human capital. Invest in human capital with better teacher training and taking teachers right from the top 30%, and you'll see changes in 10 years. Invest in social capital and strengthening your community and how your teachers and schools work together as teachers and with administrators and communities right now, and you'll see changes within the next year or 2 that affect the students right in front of you. So here are some of the ways we think about strengthening social capital. Building professional learning communities as real, lively communities that people want to come to at the end of the day, not just to implement government priorities. Schools helping each other, supporting each other in their work. Collective responsibility for all students. A shared common language. And collaborative tools like anchor charts or word walls or data walls, but anything really, examples of student work, protocols for coaching and mentoring, anything that has teachers focus on the business of working together. These are some of the things that strengthen social capital. And then there's a third one, which is the most curious, but absolutely critical, and that is decisional capital. And this is really how these two other forms of capital play out over time, over the course of your career. Decisional capital comes from a term in law called decisional law, which in Canada is understood as common law or case law. This is really about how you develop the capacity to judge, to become a judge and a good judge, when the evidence is never incontrovertible. You wouldn't need judges if the evidence was cast iron. You'd only need computers. So judges learn how to judge by having lots of cases, real cases they see on their own, real cases they analyze with other people, and hypothetical cases, precedents of cases that they look at together over time. And all professions are the same. Data aren't self-evident. You develop the capacity to judge as a doctor or an architect or an engineer by having lots of experience, lots of practice. And here's what we learned through the work that we did about the importance of practice. Because the practice isn't just a case of repeating the same thing over and over. It's how you stretch yourself in your practice, or other people stretch you. How, if you think about playing a guitar, as I do rather badly, you don't just repeat the same chords when you learn. You can pick that up fairly quickly. But at some point, you have to learn to stretch your fingers to play the bar chords. And this takes some time, and a lot of support, and a lot of persistence. And many people, including me, because I don't have a mission to be Eric Clapton, give up at that point and end up just playing like this. But those who want to be really great performers have to move to many moments like stretching to the bar chord and not just repeating the existing chords that they can play. And this is true of teaching. We have to not just repeat the few easy chords that we pick up at the beginning or their equivalent, but we have to learn to stretch ourselves, push ourselves, to move up a level, a few frets on the instrument at the same time. And we do that alone, and we do that through reflection with others, and we do that by inquiring in what we do in our practice together over time. So how long does this practice take? How many years does it require to be a maestro, to be orchestra class, to be on top of your game? And here's what we found looking at research, including our own in Canada, California, and the UK. First of all, there are two things that matter in terms of developing your capital as a teacher. One is capability, that's how good you are. Two is commitment, that's how passionate and dedicated you are. These are not the same thing, and you can be high and low on each one, with the other one not necessarily being at the same level. So when you put these two together, there are really three stages in the career that seem to be important. In early career, in the first 3 years in teaching, the years that many of the new business capital reformers are attracted to, when you have teachers who are enthusiastic, they're not tenured, they're cheap, they'll probably move on, many of them, to something else. They'll do as they're told, they don't complain. They'll give endless hours to the day, they have no dependence. In early career, the evidence shows teachers are more committed, more enthusiastic than at any other point in career. But on average, they are the least capable. They're very keen, but they have a lot to learn yet. They've got the few basic chords, but they haven't really stretched themselves into the areas of teaching that are most difficult and most challenging, like differentiated instruction, for example, over time. So this is the early career point. The phone's going, so if you'd like to answer it, you can. In late career, which is about after around 20 to 22 years in the job, we hit a converse scenario. Here, teachers, but not completely. Here, teachers, on average, not always, on average, are less committed than at any other point in the career. They're losing steam, they're turning off, they're becoming cynical, morale is declining, motivation is falling away. But their competence is all over the map. It is more variable than at any other point. What do we see in teachers in late career? We see about 4 different scenarios. I just want to go through them with you very, very quickly. The most important, but often the least frequent, is teachers who are renewed. Teachers who have the capacity to renew themselves, or teachers who are renewed by effective leaders and effective colleagues. So we have many of these. We have some at Boston College who will come and do their PhD, not because they want to be a teacher educator or a principal. They're outstanding teachers. They stay in teaching. They're just hungry to learn. They want to be still, at 58, a better teacher and a better teacher, and are always pushing ahead. Our quest, of course, should be in late career, despite what's happening in your physical health, despite what's happening in the family issues you've got with aging relatives, dependents, and so on. Despite the fact you may have been treated badly at some points in earlier career, that we need as many teachers as possible in this phase of continuing renewal. But sadly, what often happens is well, not sadly, but realistically, we often encounter 3 other scenarios instead. The first is the disenchanted. This is a very sad group. This is a group who in early career were very committed, very passionate, very excited in terms of innovation and change. But when they gave themselves to it wholeheartedly, they found that 2 or 3 times they cranked themselves up time and time again. They found that the innovators moved on, the focus shifted, the money ran out, the principal left, and a new one came in with a new fancy idea instead of the old principle. So after 2 or 3 times, a bit like people who have repeated failed marriages, unlike Elizabeth Taylor, that they learned that this was not a wise thing to do, that if you invested your all in a big change, you'd be let down. So really better just to focus on a few students who are within your control and quietly get on with making the differences you can with the kids that you know you can affect. These teachers can be renewed, can be re-engaged, if they can be convinced by their colleagues, often by the teacher leaders in the school, that the change that they're being asked to invest in really will make a difference to students, that it really will last, and that the champions of it, particularly the principal, will not be leaving for the next 3 to 5 years. So the change will really have a chance to embed within the school. A second group, which is really very interesting, They're really the subject of a new book by Susan Cain called Quiet. And Quiet is about introverts. She argues that we live in a society now that values extroverts, that values the outspoken, the outrageous. You know, why do people watch reality TV? Why do they watch New Jersey or Miami or whatever housewives it is you are watching? Because we're drawn to outrageous, upfront behavior. These are the people who succeed in organizations, the extroverts. But 30% of people, she argues, you may be one, you may be married to one, you will teach many, but 30% of people are introverts. They're quiet. They're not necessarily cripplingly shy. They're quiet. They'll talk to one or two people at a party rather than be the life and soul of it. They hate Halloween. Every year they face Halloween with feelings of dread, wondering what pathetic imitation of a costume can they put on this year without going completely over the top, like all the school board consultants, who are, of course, not quiet ones at all. So, these are the quiet. They're not shy. They don't have a disorder. They just have a different way of being. They're often exceptionally good leaders. Steve Cardwell, I would argue, is a quiet one. Not an I don't know if that's true. He'll want to say. And what do quiet ones do? Quiet ones will be happy to make changes in their own classes. They'll be glad to get together with 2, 3, 4 other teachers and work on something steadily together in a humble way that will really make a difference to the kids that they affect. But if you want them to be a rah-rah cheerleader for a whole school change, to jump in without fear or embarrassment, then you'll be very disappointed. You will engage these teachers in change if you respect the ways that they engage with change. If you recognize there are many different kinds of changes that can go on in a school, that teachers can initiate change as well as implement them. And then you can connect these small pockets of change together with what other teachers are doing. So the quiet ones have a lot to offer. Last are the defensives. The defensives are people who came into teaching for the wrong reasons. They don't like teaching. They stayed too long in teaching. They don't have any options other than teaching. They don't even particularly like people. Many don't even like themselves, but they've nowhere else to go. They are tiny in number, and the opponents of teachers and teaching massively overestimate how many there are, because those who question change, who challenge it, are often lumped into this bottom category when they belong to the other categories above. So it's a small, very tiny number. And what Michael Fullan and I argue, and the evidence shows, is that if you get everything else right amongst teachers as a collegial community, it is teachers themselves who will deal with this group, who will become impatient with this very small number, and who will slowly freeze them out over time if their dedication is lacking and their commitment is questionable. So this is the end of the career. Why does this matter? Because there are things that will really affect whether teachers in later career move up into the renewed category or are in particularly the disenchanted category below. And this is what happens in mid-career, which is the final part of what I have to present for you now. In mid-career, this is somewhere about 8 to 20 years in the job. This is the point where teachers do reach the top of their game. How many hours is 8 years in teaching? It is 10,000 hours. The hours that Malcolm Gladwell in Outliers said it takes to practice to be orchestra class rather than good enough to play in the pub on a Saturday night. In these years in mid-career, it's how much practice you get that matters, but also remember how much challenge, how much stretching, how much you're continually being renewed that really matters. So this mid-career period is desperately important if you're not going to shore up problems for your colleagues and yourself at the end. It's desperately important. And yet, like the middle child in the family or the quiet kid in the class, it's the one that principals and colleagues most neglect. We put all our effort into the first 3 years, getting our teachers started, up and going, so they don't have major problems anymore. Then they look okay. Then they seem like they're on their own. So we leave them alone to concentrate on them and the 1 or 2 big problems we've got in our school right at the end of the career. Yet it's exactly here where we need to invest so much of our time as colleagues, with teachers when they are doing well but want to be pushed and stretched even further. In Ontario, the Teacher Leadership and Learning Project, where teachers design their own innovations, more than 5,000 have done this now, with government funding, has been set up by the union for teachers with 4 or more years experience, because they said there was really nothing in the system for them to work and be stretched by their colleagues until that point. So all these periods matter. So decisional capital, judgment, means lots of practice, lots of challenging, good mentoring and coaching, engaging together in inquiry, reflecting on our judgments, having different career tracks that we can follow, like teachers do in Singapore, and getting sabbaticals and study leaves. Australian public workers are compelled to take 10 weeks, to take an extended period of leave every 10 years as a condition of their contract as public sector workers. So this is decisional capital. When you add these 3 things together, you get professional capital. And when I worked with your administrators in Whistler a while ago, and we got them to brainstorm on worksheets all around the room what were the key issues that were important and the ones that they wanted to address, this is the wordle that they came up with. These are the things that matter to your administrators. Being professional, collaborating. Teachers, it's a bigger word than any other. Capital, the importance of your skill, your quality, the recognition and respect you deserve over time. And when we asked them what they thought was important and what they wanted to focus on, these are the things they said. They wanted to look at, and they thought it was important and that they valued collaboration. They thought that issues of respect and recognition for the profession, teachers and administrators, more trust between teachers and administrators, working in both directions, and between the profession and the government was particularly important at this time in BC. Time and funding for professional development that isn't just scheduled, mandated, laid on for implementation of government priorities, important as they are, but time and funding for self-initiated professional development. Support so that teachers have greater capacity to use effectively differentiated instruction, and more support for working with parents and students and giving students greater voice. So this is professional capital. You know, it's obvious really when you think about it. We've known much of this for years. Most of it is obvious. If you really want strong learning in classrooms, you want strong teachers working in them as well. We know that they should be well qualified, committed, and capable. But what we also know too now is that the more social capital, the better the trust, the greater the collaboration you have. It just moves you light years ahead. British Columbia is one of the 4 highest performing provinces in Canada, which is the highest performing English and French speaking jurisdiction in education in the world. You've done that even after years of dispute, tension, argument, rancor between government and teachers, between one sector of the profession and another. Imagine what could be achieved if all those different groups much more began to pull together officially as well as behind the scenes to move your schools, your kids, yourselves and the province forward over time. Not just for some schools here and there, not just for some teachers at different points in the career, but for all teachers at all points in the career, for all schools in the province, not just a few. And if you feel this is sometimes a bit too much, if it looks like the disputes will go on forever, then just imagine that you are Nelson Mandela, looking out of the bars on your cell on Robben Island, and you imagine, you dream that one day you and your peers on Robben Island will lead the country out of apartheid. But your prisoners won't let you study, so you agitate internationally and succeed for the right to study. And then your jailers will not give you a place to study. And so you go into the black men's toilets, where the white guards are too afraid to tread, in order to hold your classes in history and literacy and politics. And when your jailers refuse to give you reading materials so that you can develop literacy, you steal the discarded newspaper wrappings from the sandwiches that your jailers have thrown away in order to have literacy materials. So we don't all have to be Nelson Mandela. We know that officially there's been some hard years in BC for teachers. We know behind the scenes that teachers and other peers have worked together very well despite all the disputes and all the difficulties. The possibilities ahead, with a change in government, a change in mood, a change in climate, and a change in understanding about what high-quality professionalism really means, gives us an opportunity to propel this board and this province even more beyond what it has already achieved, to become possibly the leading jurisdiction in the world. Thanks for listening. I've no idea if you're even still there, but I look forward to engaging in a bit of Q&A with you now. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. We're definitely still here and listening with bated breath, really. It's lovely to hear you conclude on an optimistic note, because I think many of us are looking forward to May and wondering how this will play out and what kind of government we'll be dealing with. But I do have a few questions, a couple of practical questions, if I may, if you have a couple minutes. If you were working with a school, what questions would you ask the staff to encourage them to begin to look at human capital, to look at their own human capital to support student learning? So if I was leading a staff, how would I engage them to begin to look at developing their human capital? Any suggestions, even a little script? How do you get them to buy into collective responsibility?
There are many ways. Actually, you asked two things there. You asked about human capital and then about collective responsibility. At the back of the book, the end of the book, we have lots of guidelines for teachers. They're not They're not mandates. They're suggestions based on exactly really the question that you've been asking. Some things are very simple. One is surprise yourself. Surprise yourself. If the most neglected emotion in teaching, but the most important, I think, is surprise. The greatest thing about teaching is surprise. The kid who, when you're out on an outdoor trip, tells you something about themselves they never told you in class, that you never realized they could do. The thing they learn about you that they never realized, they had another part to your personality. The moment when they come out with an extraordinary piece of vocabulary that you never thought they had, and suddenly this word just shoots out in front of you. This is surprise. It's one of the greatest things about teaching, more than you get in architecture, in medicine, in any other profession. So the first thing would be and I say this to teachers in America who are so scripted it's not true, and so over-tested you cannot imagine the despair that they sink into. And we say, and many have taken it up, on a Friday afternoon, just half an hour a week, do something totally different than you have ever done before. It might be you might do brain gym or something like this, but surprise your kids, surprise yourself. The second is don't wait for people to do things for you or to suggest things to you. Leadership is all about taking the first step. It's about being first to go over the parapet, first outside the tent when it's freezing cold, first to say you're sorry when you've had an argument, even though you know it's not your fault. I'm married. I know all about this. Okay, so leadership is about taking the first step, and teachers take the lead when you offer to help to a colleague before they offer it to you. When especially as one of the best teachers in the school, you ask for help from a colleague, because if the best teacher in the school is asking for help, boy, does that make it easier for other people to ask for help over time. If you're a quiet one, don't leap in. Don't feel you have to charge in like Boadicea with some huge big initiative. But just find one or two colleagues to do something new, to inquire into your practice, to check. Do your literacy materials favour the girls more than the boys? Is this why the boys are struggling? So I've not mentioned anything huge here. I've on purpose mentioned the simple things that start with you that you can actually do tomorrow. This is where I'd suggest that you started.
Thank you. Just one other question. In your book, you talk about the tragedy of polarized groups. What are some suggestions you might have for us to overcome this in the current BC context?
Do you have a Nobel Peace Prize? Do you have a Nobel Peace Prize waiting in the wings there after the answer? Yeah. So apartheid ended after lots of agitation and collaborative work, but one reason it ended was even the perpetrators of apartheid were just sick of the misery of it all. The war in Northern Ireland came to an end because people were sick of the misery of it all. They realized there had to be something better than just constantly fighting each other all the time. And it takes both sides to some degree to come to this realization. But like saying sorry in a marriage, one of you has to be the grown-up and one of you has to make the first step. Mm-hmm. And teachers are big people. They're big in heart. They're big in moral capital. Nobody should have more moral capital than teachers. Nobody should have more justification to take the first step than teachers. And so Michael Fullan said, with the Premier of Ontario, that one way, after the Mike Harris years, and you'll have teachers in BC, you do, who were refugees from Mike Harris. I became a Canadian refugee from Thatcherism, so I know exactly how they feel. That the government said they had to give the unions initially more respect than they felt they deserved. Now, I don't agree with that phrasing, but they took the first step. They made resources available to the unions. They gave the unions $25 million to spend on staff development. And for some of them, it was a bit begrudging, to be honest. But they realized somebody had to make the first move here. And I think it'd be just great in BC, especially as you're coming up to a new scenario, a new government. If teachers didn't say, let's go back to individual autonomy, we're doing a great job, leave us alone. I think that would be the biggest mistake. It would just make everybody believe you wanted to go back to the 1970s. But come forward with a dynamic, progressive agenda of how strong you think you are, how stronger you think you can be, and what you want more than just time and money, but what you want in terms of ideas and quality and opportunities to collaborate that can develop that strength even further. I'd say you've got to make the first move, and the first move is for the teachers to get together with the administrators. It's not the administrators' fault that the government's forced you apart. It's not their fault that you've been forced apart. Bring yourselves back together, because you have so much more in common than you have in opposition to each other. And lead the charge. Don't wait to see what the NDP will do and then react. Take the lead. Show them the agenda. Show them you've got something really positive on the table that they can resonate with and support. That's what I would say.
Well, that's very hopeful sentiment, and your book certainly will help us in moving that kind of idea forward, and we thank you. I'd like to introduce my colleague, Rod Ratzlaff from Vancouver Elementary School Teachers Association, VESTA, and he's going to do the closing for us.
Thank you very much, Mary. On behalf of the elementary and secondary teachers, administrators, and management representatives of the Vancouver School Board, I'd like to thank you for your time this evening, Mr. Hargreaves. To quote Professional Capital, create positive energy and excitement in relation to a commonly valued goal, and you will always pull lots of people towards you. For teachers, this is the first time that many of us have had the opportunity to hear you speak, and we've all felt that positive energy as we have listened to you this afternoon. Public education, the system, and its future is the goal that we value most. Your insight and ideas have pulled us in, and now it's up to all of us, individually, as staffs, and collectively, to push together towards our goal. Thank you again, Mr. Hargreaves, and thank you all for coming this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, is that it now? Okay, thank you very much. Travel safely. Take care, and all of you. Thank you so much again for giving up your own time after a long day to do this. That's just a great credit to the professionals you truly are. All the best then. Bye-bye.
There's just one more thing. Sorry, Andy. Steve just passed me a note. Could I ask you to comment about your 100 quotes in 100 days? Could you tell us, please, quote number 39, which is also Vancouver's designated school district number?
I don't have it in front of me. What is it?
Quote number 39.
Yeah, do you have it? I could look it up, but it'd take me a minute.
Oh, I think Steve might have it. Talk about putting you on the spot.
You know, I don't remember by number off the top of my head.
Okay, while we're waiting for Steve, I just wanted to say I have a Professional Capital book club, and any VSB employees interested can register online. I have one going, and another one's been opened up now because of demand. So if you're interested, you can sign up online. Number 39 is...
If you do want to check these quotes, by the way, just go to Twitter, if you're on Twitter. So go to Hargreaves BC, and on Twitter, as well as many other things, and I follow you. Well, I don't follow you. I get arrested for that. In the old days, when you followed people, you got arrested. But I follow Steve, and
I follow Steve.
Yeah, and so it's got many things on there, including retweets from Steve. But it's 100 quotes in 100 days, and they're all from my work at some point over the last 25 years.
Okay,
What's
thank
number
you.
39?
So, number 39 is on politics, and the quote is, "The teacher has more power than the minister."
It's true.
Nice note to close on.
Yeah. Okay. No. I agree with that. All the best. Bye-bye.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Just one more thing. If you wanted to tweet out, and we went through this I didn't even speak to this in the beginning, but you certainly could have. And if you'd like to provide some feedback on any of the ideas that Andy's put forward, there's a message address up there, andyfeedback@vsb.bc.ca, and then the Twitter hashtags. And so there it is. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming at the end of a long day. Thanks.